A billionaire walked into a quiet bakery and met a hungry little girl who offered to trade her shoes for cake. One small birthmark shattered his world. 3 years of lost silence and unanswered prayers collided in a moment that would change every life forever. The alarm rang at exactly 6 a.m., sharp and unforgiving. Ethan Cross opened his eyes but did not move. The house around him was silent, too silent for a home this large. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture chosen by designers who never lived there. Everything perfect, everything cold. 3 years. 3 years since the morning his daughter vanished, and every dawn still felt the same heavy, airless, unmoving. Ethan finally sat up on the edge of the bed and rubbed his face with both hands. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened mirror, 36 years old, successful beyond measure, and utterly hollow. The kind of wealth that could buy anything except the one thing he needed most. On the nightstand sat a small photo frame turned face down. He always left it that way before sleeping. It was the only way he could rest without breaking apart. Now, as part of the ritual he never skipped, Ethan reached for the frame and turned it upright. Ivy, 3 years old. Brown hair tied into a crooked ponytail, bright blue eyes filled with curiosity and trust. A smile so open it hurt to look at. "Good morning, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The memory struck him instantly, her laughter echoing through the house, tiny footsteps running down the hall, the way she used to press her forehead against his and whisper secrets only they shared. That world no longer existed. The coffee table downstairs still held a stack of old flyers from years ago. Missing child. Please call. Reward offered. He never threw them away. He couldn't. Ethan stood dressed mechanically and walked toward the window. Outside, the city of Riverhaven was waking up under a gray sky. Cars moved. People hurried. Life went on. His did not. For 3 years, Ethan Cross had been surviving, but he had stopped living. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen as the machine hummed to life. Ethan leaned against the counter, staring at nothing while the dark liquid poured into the mug. He had prepared the grounds the night before, just like always. Habits were easier than choices. "Enough," he said suddenly, his voice echoing in the empty space. The word surprised even him. Enough hiding. Enough waiting for time to soften something that refused to fade. He wrapped his fingers around the mug, took one sip, and grimaced. Too hot. He set it down untouched. "I'm not staying here today." The decision felt impulsive, almost reckless, but also necessary. The walls felt closer than usual, the silence louder. Ethan grabbed his coat keys and wallet, then paused at the front door. For a moment, doubt crept in. He could stay home. He always did. No one expected him anywhere. But something inside him, small, stubborn, pushed back. He stepped outside. Cold air slapped his face, sharp and bracing. He pulled his coat tighter and walked toward his car. The sky was low and heavy, the kind that promised snow but never quite delivered. Ethan drove without direction, past office buildings he no longer entered, past cafes filled with people who laughed too easily, past schools where children waited with backpacks nearly as big as they were. Every child's voice made his chest tighten. After several blocks, his stomach growled an unfamiliar sensation. He realized he hadn't eaten properly in days. Coffee and convenience had replaced meals. At a red light, he noticed a small bakery on the corner. Wooden sign. Warm lights behind the glass. Bread and Company. He didn't remember seeing it before. Maybe it was new. Or maybe he had simply never looked. The light turned green. Ethan pulled over. A small bell rang as Ethan pushed open the bakery door. Warmth wrapped around him, instantly heat light, and the unmistakable scent of fresh bread. It was a stark contrast to the gray world outside. The space was modest. A few wooden tables, a glass display filled with pastries, cakes, and loaves lined up like quiet promises. Behind the counter stood an older woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled into a neat bun. "Good morning," she said with a gentle smile. "What can I get you, black coffee?" Ethan replied. "Large and cheese bread." The words felt foreign in his mouth. He rarely ordered anything that required thought. He sat near the window watching steam rise from the cup when it arrived. The first sip slid down his throat, warm and grounding. For the first time that morning, he felt present. Outside, Riverhaven moved at its usual pace. People rushed by, unaware of the private grief carried by the man inside the bakery. The bell rang again. Ethan wouldn't have looked, he usually didn't, but a small, high-pitched voice cut through the room. He turned instinctively. A little girl stood just inside the doorway alone. She couldn't have been more than 6. Her clothes were oversized and worn, her shoes scuffed thin at the soles. Brown hair fell messily around her face, and faint traces of dirt marked her cheeks. She hesitated, scanning the room as if unsure whether she was allowed to be there. Then she saw the display. Her eyes widened. Slowly, almost reverently, she walked toward the glass case and pressed her small hands against it. Cakes, bread, frosted pastries glowing under warm lights. Treasure. The woman behind the counter noticed her and frowned slightly, concern flickering across her face. Ethan watched from his seat, something stirring deep in his chest. The girl swallowed her gaze, fixed on the food. Hungry, and somehow impossibly, Ethan felt that this quiet moment, this ordinary morning, was about to change everything. The little girl stood frozen in front of the glass display. Her palms were flat against the surface, leaving faint smudges as her eyes moved slowly from one tray to the next. Chocolate rolls, soft bread dusted with sugar, a cake topped with bright blue frosting that seemed almost too vivid to be real. She leaned closer, as if the smell alone might be enough. Behind the counter, the clerk cleared her throat gently. "Sweetheart," she said, careful not to sound harsh, "can I help you?" The girl startled and pulled her hands back quickly, tucking them behind her back, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. "I'm just looking," she said softly. Her voice was small but steady, too steady for a child her age. "And where's your mom?" the woman asked, glancing toward the door. The girl hesitated for half a second, just long enough for the lie to form. "She's outside," she replied, pointing vaguely toward the street. Ethan noticed the way her eyes flicked away as she said it. The clerk followed the gesture, peering through the window. No one waited outside. She looked back at the girl, concern replacing suspicion. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. The girl stepped away from the counter and began walking slowly around the bakery. Her gaze lingered on every table, every plate. She didn't stare at people, only at their food. She stopped near Ethan. Not close enough to intrude, just close enough to see. Her eyes rested on the untouched cheese bread on his plate. Ethan pretended to focus on his coffee, but he could feel her presence like a quiet pull. He recognized that look. He'd seen it once before, years ago, when Ivy was small and too shy to ask for what she needed. Hunger mixed with hope. Ethan glanced at the girl again. Dirt under her fingernails, sleeves too long for her arms, shoes worn thin at the toes. She swallowed. He could have looked away. Instead, he spoke. "Hi," Ethan said gently. The girl jumped, then looked up at him. Her eyes were a striking shade of blue, clear, bright, unsettlingly familiar. "Hi," she whispered back. Ethan tilted his head slightly, keeping his voice calm. "Are you hungry?" The girl didn't answer right away. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, glancing briefly toward the counter, then back at Ethan. Her fingers curled nervously at the hem of her oversized sweater. Finally, she took a cautious step closer. "Mister," she said, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret, "I can trade." Ethan frowned slightly. "Trade?" She nodded and pointed down. "My shoes." Ethan followed her gesture. The shoes were old, too big, the soles worn, nearly smooth, laces fraying. Shoes that had clearly walked far more than they should have. For what he asked, though, something in his chest already ached with the answer. She lifted her chin and pointed toward the display. For a piece of cake, she said. The chocolate one. With the blue frosting. The words landed like a weight. Ethan stared at her for a moment, unsure if he'd heard correctly. You want to give me your shoes, he said slowly, for cake. She nodded again, completely serious. They still work, she added quickly, as if afraid he might refuse. I can walk without them for a little while. Something broke open inside Ethan. No, he said softly. You don't have to give me anything. Her eyes widened. Really? He pushed his chair back and stood careful not to move too suddenly. I can buy you cake, he said. You keep your shoes. For a heartbeat, the girl didn't react. Then her face changed. Her eyes lit up, her lips parting into a smile so bright, it seemed to erase the weariness written into her small body. It was a child's smile, pure, unguarded, full of disbelief and joy. Really, she asked again. Really? Ethan signaled to the clerk. The chocolate cake with blue frosting, he said. For her. The woman hesitated, studying Ethan's face, then the girl's. Finally, she nodded and turned to prepare the plate. The girl stood still, as if afraid the moment might vanish if she moved. Ethan gestured to the chair across from him. You can sit, he said. She climbed up carefully, feet dangling above the floor, hands folded neatly in her lap. What's your name, he asked. Mila, she replied. Ethan smiled faintly. Mila, he repeated. He had no idea that this simple exchange cake for kindness was about to change the course of both their lives. The plate arrived with a soft clink. A generous slice of chocolate cake sat at the center, crowned with thick blue frosting that caught the light. To Mila, it might as well have been a treasure. Her eyes grew wide. For me, she asked just to be sure. Ethan nodded. Go ahead. She picked up the fork carefully, as if it were fragile. The first bite went slowly into her mouth. Mila closed her eyes. For a moment, the world disappeared. She chewed deliberately, savoring every second, every hint of sweetness. When she swallowed, she let out a quiet breath, half sigh, half laugh. It's good, she said, nodding with great seriousness. Ethan smiled, though his chest felt tight. He watched the way she tilted her head slightly as she ate, the way her small hands held the fork with intense focus. It was a strangely intimate moment. As Mila took another bite, her legs began to swing under the table. The movement caused her dress to lift just enough for Ethan to notice something on her left ankle. A mark. Small. Pale. Crescent-shaped. Ethan's breath caught. The bakery noise faded, the clink of cups, the low hum of conversation, the bell at the door. All he could see was that mark. Same shape. Same place. His heart slammed violently against his ribs. He blinked hard, telling himself not to be foolish. Birthmarks were common. Coincidences happened every day. But his hands began to shake anyway. Mila noticed. Are you okay? She asked, peering at him with concern. Ethan swallowed and forced a smile. I'm fine, he said, though his voice betrayed him. She looked down at her ankle, curious. This, she asked, lifting her foot slightly. My birthmark. She smiled proudly. Aunt Hannah says it looks like a moon. She says it means I'm special. Ethan couldn't speak. The memory hit him without mercy, 3-year-old Ivy sitting on his lap, pointing to her ankle. Daddy, look. My moon mark. Tears blurred his vision. Mila reached across the table and touched his hand gently. Did I do something wrong? She asked. Ethan shook his head quickly. No, he said, his voice breaking. You didn't. But deep down he knew. This was no longer just kindness. This was the beginning of something he had waited 3 years to feel again. Hope. Ethan forced himself to breathe. Slow, controlled, quiet. He looked away from the crescent-shaped mark and focused on the table instead, on the half-empty coffee cup, on anything that wasn't pulling him back into memories he didn't trust. Don't do this, he told himself. You've done this before. For 3 years he had seen Ivy everywhere, on playgrounds and grocery stores and passing reflections on bus windows. Every child with brown hair and blue eyes had briefly become her. Every hope had ended the same way. Disappointment, pain, silence. Mila finished her cake slowly, carefully scraping the last bit of blue frosting from the plate with her fork. When she was done, she wiped her mouth with a napkin, folding it neatly the way an adult might. "Thank you," she said earnestly. "It was really good." "You're welcome," Ethan replied, his voice steadier now. He studied her again, deliberately, critically. He told himself to look for differences. Anything that would prove this was just another coincidence. Her face was a little thinner than Ivy's had been, her hair darker, her voice older. "She's not your daughter," he insisted internally. "She can't be." Mila hopped down from the chair, slipping her arms into the sleeves of her sweater. "I have to go," she said. Ethan's chest tightened. "Your aunt?" he asked carefully. "Is she waiting?" Mila shook her head. "She's working. Then who's with you?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Mila shrugged, unconcerned. "No one. I know the way." Something cold brushed the edge of Ethan's thoughts. "That's a long walk," he said gently. It's okay," Mila interrupted quickly, already backing toward the door. "I do it all the time." The bell rang as she pushed it open. Ethan stood abruptly. "Mila," he called. She turned, eyes bright. "Yes," he hesitated. There were 100 questions he wanted to ask. 1,000 reasons to follow her. Instead, he chose the safest words. "Be careful." She smiled. "I always am." Then she was gone. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the door long after it had closed. And for the first time in 3 years, the thought he had sworn never to entertain whispered clearly in his mind. What if she's really Ivy? The bakery felt different once Mila left. Quieter, emptier. Ethan returned to his seat slowly, his movements heavy as though gravity had increased. The cake plate across from him was smeared with blue frosting, a small, innocent mess that shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. He stared at it until the clerk approached. "She's a sweet child," the woman said softly. "Comes by sometimes." Ethan's head snapped up. "She does," the clerk nodded. "Not often, and never buys anything, just looks." "Do you know where she lives?" he asked. The woman hesitated, then shook her head. "No. She's always alone." Alone. The word echoed in Ethan's chest. He left money on the table without noticing how much and stepped outside into the cold air. The street was busy now. Cars, footsteps, voices, but Mila was nowhere in sight. She had disappeared as quietly as she'd arrived. Ethan stood there longer than necessary, scanning the sidewalk, the corners, the passing faces. Nothing. Finally, he returned to his car. That night, sleep didn't come. Images of Mila replayed over and over, her smile, her careful manners, the way she'd touched his hand when she thought she'd upset him, and the mark. He opened a drawer beside his bed and pulled out a small, worn box. Inside were photographs, documents, memories he rarely allowed himself to touch. Ivy's birth certificate, a lock of hair from her first haircut, and a photo of her sitting on his lap, pointing proudly at her ankle. "Daddy, look, my moon mark." Ethan pressed his fingers to his eyes. "This is impossible," he whispered. He told himself coincidences happened. That hope was dangerous, that believing without proof would only destroy him again. Still, when morning came, he found himself dressing quickly. He drove back to the bakery. Then the next day. And the next. Each time he ordered the same coffee, sat at the same table, watched the door. 5 days passed. On the 6th morning, the clerk approached him with a sympathetic smile. "You're waiting for her, aren't you?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "A little girl," he said quietly. "Her name is Mila. The woman sighed. I haven't seen her since that day. Ethan forced a smile. If she comes back. Would you call me? He wrote his number on a napkin and slid it across the counter. She's my niece. He added, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. We're worried. The clerk nodded, her expression softening. As Ethan walked back to his car, the city felt larger, colder, and the silence felt louder than ever. On the 13th day, Ethan broke his routine. Instead of turning toward the bakery, he drove to Riverside Park, the place he had avoided for 3 years. The park hadn't changed. The same paths, the same benches, the same playground, now brighter with fresh paint and newer equipment. Children ran, laughed, climbed. Parents watched from a distance. Ethan sat on a bench beneath a bare tree, his hands clenched tightly together. You promised you wouldn't come back here, he thought. But something had drawn him, an instinct he no longer trusted, but couldn't ignore. He watched a little girl chase pigeons across the grass. Another practiced cartwheels nearby. Every sound scraped gently against his chest. Then he saw her. Mila sat alone near the edge of the park, drawing shapes in the dirt with a small stick. Her hair was neater today, pulled back loosely, but her dress was still too big. Ethan's heart stopped. For a moment he didn't move. He was afraid she would vanish if he did. Afraid this was another trick of his grief. Then Mila looked up. Her blue eyes met his, and she smiled. Hi, Ethan. She remembered his name. Something inside him broke open quietly, completely. Hi, Mila, he said, standing slowly, careful not to startle her. What a coincidence, she added, as if meeting strangers in parks was perfectly normal. I've been looking for you, he admitted, sitting a few feet away. She shrugged and went back to drawing. We don't come to the bakery much. Who's we? Ethan asked gently. My Aunt Hannah and my Uncle Noah, Mila replied. They're busy a lot. Ethan studied her, how comfortable she seemed alone, how practiced her independence was. A child, too, used to taking care of herself. Do you like living with them? He asked. Mila paused. They're nice, she said finally. Sometimes we don't have much food, but Aunt Hannah says things will get better. Ethan felt the weight of every unasked question pressing down on him. He looked at the little girl in front of him, so familiar, so fragile, and as the wind rustled through the trees, one truth settled heavily in his chest. If he walked away again, he might never forgive himself. Ethan kept his distance, careful not to crowd Mila. He remembered what it felt like to be a child, how easily kindness could turn frightening if it came too fast, too close. So he sat beside her on the bench, not touching, not rushing. What are you drawing? He asked. Mila held up the stick proudly. On the dirt, she had sketched a small house, a crooked sun, and 3 stick figures. That's our place, she said, pointing. That's me. That's Aunt Hannah. That's Uncle Noah. Ethan smiled. It's a nice house. It's small, Mila admitted, but it's warm. Warm. The word stayed with him. Do you come to this park often? He asked. When it's sunny, Mila said. Aunt Hannah works across the street. She pointed to an office building visible beyond the trees. She can see me from the window sometimes. Sometimes. Ethan felt a quiet ache settle in his chest. And Uncle Noah? He asked. He stays home, Mila replied. He's looking for work. She said it casually, without complaint, as if that was simply the way things were. Ethan chose his next words carefully. Would it be okay if I met them? Mila looked up, surprised. Why, he didn't want to lie, but he couldn't tell the whole truth either. I know people who help with jobs, he said honestly. Maybe I could help your uncle. Mila's face brightened. Really, really. She considered this for a moment, then nodded. Aunt Hannah would like that. She always says we need a little miracle. The word hit Ethan harder than he expected. Miracle. I can take you to our place tomorrow, Mila added. It's not very close, but I know the way. Tomorrow felt too far away. Fear whispered that she might disappear again. That would be great, Ethan said gently. But maybe today we can just talk a little more. Mila smiled and returned to her drawing. They sat together in quiet companionship, the city moving around them. Ethan noticed how relaxed she seemed in his presence, how easily she filled the silence. And with every minute that passed, one truth grew harder to deny. This child trusted him, and trust was something he could not afford to betray. The apartment building was older than the ones around it. Paint peeled from the railings. The stairwell smelled faintly of cleaning soap and cooked rice. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean cared for. Mila climbed the stairs ahead of Ethan, counting each step under her breath. Third floor, she announced, proudly stopping in front of a green door with the number 302 painted by hand. She knocked once, then opened it without waiting. Aunt Hannah, I'm back. A woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked tired, but not careless. Her hair was pulled back, her clothes simple and neat. She froze when she saw Ethan. Mila, she said cautiously. Who is this? This is Ethan, Mila replied cheerfully. He bought me cake, and he wants to help Uncle Noah get a job. Hannah's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in instinctive protection. Ethan stepped forward slowly. I'm sorry for dropping by unannounced, he said. I met Mila at the bakery. We talked. I didn't want to worry her, but she's been on my mind. Hannah studied his face, searching for something danger, perhaps. Finding none, she nodded once. I'm Hannah Gray, she said. Please, come in. The apartment was small but orderly. Children's drawings decorated the walls. A single couch, worn but clean, sat against the far wall. From the bedroom emerged a man with graying hair and tired eyes. Noah, Hannah said, This is Ethan. They shook hands. Noah's grip was firm, honest. I heard you might know about jobs, Noah said quietly. I do, Ethan replied. Construction, logistics, real work. Hope flickered briefly across Noah's face. They sat. As Mila disappeared into her room, Hannah poured coffee. The air grew heavy, not hostile, but careful. How long has Mila been with you? Ethan asked gently. Hannah exchanged a glance with Noah. Almost 3 years, she said. Ethan's heart pounded, and before that Hannah took a breath. We found her, she said softly, alone, frightened. She couldn't tell us her name. The room fell silent. Ethan listened, not accusing, not interrupting. For the first time, the past was beginning to speak. Hannah's voice trembled, but she didn't stop. She was so small, she said, no shoes, barely speaking. She kept saying she wanted her dad. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. We were scared, Noah added. We thought about the police, but we were poor. No legal help. We were afraid they'd take her away, put her somewhere cold. So you kept her, Ethan said quietly. Hannah nodded. We gave her a name. Mila. She needed one. Ethan felt the strange collision of emotions, gratitude and grief, anger and understanding, press against his ribs. He looked around the apartment again. This was not a place of cruelty. This was a place of survival. I searched for my daughter, Ethan said slowly. Every day. For 3 years. Hannah's face went pale. We didn't know, she whispered. We saw missing posters, but none looked exactly like her. And after a while, she became your child, Ethan finished. Yes, Noah said, his voice breaking. She's everything to us. The door to Mila's room creaked open slightly. She stood there clutching a small cloth ball, watching the adults with wide eyes. Ethan immediately softened his tone. Mila, he said gently, we're just talking. She nodded unconcerned and padded back inside. Ethan turned to Hannah and Noah. I'm not here to take anything away, he said, especially not from her. Hannah's shoulders shook as tears filled her eyes. She deserves love, she said. That's all we ever wanted. So do I, Ethan replied. The three adults sat in silence, bound by a shared truth none of them had expected. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, a fragile understanding was forming. Ethan stood. "I'll help with the job," he said to Noah. "I promise." Noah nodded, overwhelmed. As Ethan walked toward the door, Mela reappeared. "Are you coming back?" she asked. Ethan knelt to her level. "If your aunt and uncle are okay with it," he said. "Yes." Mela smiled. For the first time since Ivy disappeared, Ethan felt something solid beneath his feet. Not certainty, but responsibility. 3 days passed. 3 days of careful distance. Ethan kept his promise. He helped Noah secure 2 job interviews. He brought groceries once, only once, making sure it never felt like charity. He spoke gently, asked permission, never crossed boundaries. Mela greeted him each time with the same bright smile, but something fragile hovered beneath the surface. The truth pressed closer every hour. On the 4th afternoon, the sky over Riverhaven darkened without warning. Thick clouds rolled in, heavy and restless. Rain threatened, the kind that arrived fast and unforgiving. Ethan was on his way to Hannah's apartment when his phone rang. It was Hannah. Her voice was tight. "Ethan." Mela went out to play, when he asked, already pulling over. "About an hour ago. She always goes to the small park, but she hasn't come back." Ethan's chest tightened. "Have you checked?" "Yes. Noah's there now. She's not." The world tilted. "I'm coming," Ethan said, already turning the car around. "Stay home. If she comes back, call me immediately." The rain began just as he reached the neighborhood. Light at first, then harder, streaking the windshield. Memories surged, unwanted, violent in their familiarity. Not again. Ethan parked and ran through the small park, calling her name, not shouting, not panicking, just loud enough to carry. Mela children were gone, benches empty. The swings creaked softly in the wind. Nothing. He forced himself to breathe, think. Where would a curious 6-year-old go when the sky darkened? Then he remembered something Mela had said once casually, as if it meant nothing. "There's a bigger park with ducks. The municipal park." Ethan sprinted back to the car as rain poured harder, soaking his coat. Traffic blurred past as he drove faster than he should have, fear clawing at his throat. By the time he reached the larger park, the storm was in full force. "Mila," he called, scanning the pathways, the playground, the lake's edge. Nothing. His heart pounded painfully. Then he saw it. Across the street, a row of closed shops. Under one awning, a small shape huddled against the glass. A yellow dress. Ethan ran. "Mila." She looked up, startled, rain dripping from her hair. "Ethan," she said, confused. "Why are you here?" He dropped to his knees in front of her, checking her arms, her hands, her face. "We were worried," he said, voice breaking despite himself. "So worried." "I just wanted to see the ducks," Mila said softly. "When it started raining, I waited." He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You did the right thing," he said gently. "But next time, tell someone, okay?" She nodded, ashamed but calm. As he lifted her into his arms, the weight felt devastatingly familiar and unbearable to lose. The heater roared inside the car. Mela sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in Ethan's coat, sipping warm cocoa from a paper cup he'd grabbed at a nearby cafe. Her hair was damp, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes steady. Too steady. Ethan drove carefully, his hands tight on the wheel. "Mila," he said after a long silence. "Do you remember when I told you I had a daughter?" She nodded. "You looked sad." "I did," he said quietly, "because I lost her." Mila stared out the window as rain streaked past. "Did she come back?" Ethan swallowed. "I think she did." Mila turned to him slowly. "What do you mean?" He pulled over beneath a streetlight engine idling. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. "Mila," he said gently, "there's something important I need to tell you. And you can take all the time you need to listen." She nodded, serious now. I believe you are my daughter." The words hung between them, fragile as glass. Mila frowned. "But Uncle Noah is my dad. He loves you," Ethan said immediately. "Very much. And Aunt Hannah loves you too." She looked confused, not afraid. But before them, Ethan continued, "You lived with me. Your name was Ivy." Mila tested the word. "Ivy." "Yes," he said. "Ivy Cross." She was quiet for a long moment. "How do you know?" she asked finally, her voice calm but searching. Ethan took a breath. "Because of many little things," he said. "Your eyes, your smile, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking, and the birthmark on your ankle, the moon shape." Mila lifted her dress slightly and looked at it. "Aunt Hannah says it's special." "It is," Ethan said, voice trembling. "My daughter had the same one." Mila stared at the mark, then back at him. "And the doll," she said suddenly. Ethan's heart skipped. "What doll? The one in my dreams?" Mila said. "Red dress? Yarn hair?" Ethan closed his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "Her name is Rosie." Silence filled the car again. Mila didn't cry. She didn't pull away. Instead, she asked the question that mattered most. "Will I lose Aunt Hannah and Uncle Noah?" Ethan turned fully toward her. "No," he said firmly. "Never. No one is losing anyone." She studied his face carefully. "Can I still see them?" "Yes. Every week, yes." Mila nodded slowly. Then softly she asked, "Can I call you Dad?" Ethan's vision blurred. "If you want to," he said. She considered it. "Okay, Dad." The storm outside softened rain easing into a quiet drizzle. Inside the car, something irreversible had changed. They returned to Hannah's apartment together. Hannah opened the door with red eyes and a trembling breath that broke when she saw Mila safe. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, pulling her into a tight hug. Ethan stood back, giving them space. Later, when Mila was in her room drawing, the three adults sat at the small kitchen table. Ethan didn't accuse. He didn't demand. He told the truth. Hannah cried quietly. Noah held her hand, jaw clenched with fear and relief tangled together. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," Hannah said. "I just wanted to keep her safe." "You did," Ethan replied. "You kept her alive." They agreed to a DNA test, not out of doubt, but clarity. The result came back undeniable. Ethan was her father. No one celebrated. No one won. They sat together in silence, absorbing the weight of it. "What matters," Ethan said finally, "is what we do next." Mila peeked out from her room. "Are you mad?" she asked. All three adults turned to her at once. "No," Ethan said softly. "No," Hannah echoed. "No," Noah added. She stepped forward slowly. "So, I have two homes." "Yes," Ethan said. "If you want." She thought about that, then smiled. "I like that." Weeks passed. Mila, now Ivy again when she chose, spent time in both places. She had 2 bedrooms, 2 sets of bedtime stories, 2 kitchens where she felt safe. One evening, Ethan brought her to his house. Her old room waited untouched. On the dresser sat a rag doll in a faded red dress. Mila froze. She walked forward, slowly lifted the doll and hugged it tight. "Rosie," she whispered. Ethan turned away, tears spilling freely. That night, Ivy asked for stars on the ceiling, and Ethan promised her the sky. The house felt different with Ivy inside it. Not louder, not brighter, just awake. Ethan noticed it in the smallest details, the way footsteps echoed down the hallway again, the way doors opened and closed softly instead of remaining untouched. Ivy moved carefully at first, as if the space itself might disappear if she stepped too fast. "This used to be my room," she asked, standing in the doorway, painted pale yellow. "Yes," Ethan replied. "I never changed it." She walked in slowly, fingers brushing the edge of the dresser, the bookshelf, the bed. Nothing felt familiar to her memory, but something in her body seemed to recognize the place. She climbed onto the bed, and sat cross-legged. "Can I sleep here tonight?" she asked. Ethan swallowed. "Only if you want to." She nodded. "I want to try." That first night, Ethan didn't sleep much. He sat in the armchair by her door listening, waiting, ready to move at the smallest sound, when Ivy stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. His heart jumped. He reminded himself gently, staying matters more than fixing. In the morning, Ivy woke early. She wandered into the kitchen in oversized pajamas, hair tangled, clutching Rosie under one arm. "Good morning," Ethan said softly. She smiled, shy but genuine. "Good morning, Dad." The words still felt fragile between them, new, untested, but it landed exactly where it belonged. Breakfast was simple. Toast, eggs, strawberries cut into small hearts, without Ethan realizing he'd done it. Ivy ate quietly, glancing up now and then, as if checking whether he was still there. "I'm going to school with Aunt Hannah today," she said. "She wants to talk to my teacher." "Of course," Ethan replied. "I'll pick you up after." Her fork paused mid-air. "You promise?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I promise." That afternoon he arrived early. He waited outside the school gate, heart racing as children poured out in clusters. When Ivy spotted him, she stopped short, then broke into a run. "You came," she said, breathless. "I told you I would." She nodded seriously. "I just needed to make sure." They walked to the car hand in hand. That night, Ivy asked him something he hadn't expected. "Are you going to disappear again?" The question was quiet. No accusation. Just honesty. Ethan crouched in front of her, meeting her eyes. "No," he said firmly. "I'm here, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." She studied his face, searching. Then she leaned forward and hugged him carefully, briefly. Learning how to stay was not dramatic. It was steady, and it was everything. Hannah and Noah came over the following Sunday. Ethan cleaned the house twice, then stopped himself. Perfection wasn't the goal. Respect was. Ivy waited near the window, twisting the hem of her dress. "What if they feel weird?" she asked. "Then we'll feel weird together," Ethan said gently. "That's okay too." When Hannah and Noah arrived, Ivy ran to them first. "You're here," she said, wrapping her arms around Hannah's waist. "Of course we are," Hannah replied, eyes shining. "We wouldn't miss this." They sat in the living room, 3 adults, 1 child, and a future none of them had planned. Ethan spoke first. "I want this to be clear," he said calmly. "Ivy needs all of us." Noah nodded. "She always has. I'm not trying to replace anyone," Ethan continued. "I just want to be her father." Hannah took a breath. "And we don't want to disappear from her life." "You won't," Ethan said. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Ivy listened quietly, hugging Rosie. "So, I can still sleep at your place sometimes?" she asked Hannah. "Yes," Hannah said immediately. "Your room is still yours. And I live here too," Ivy added, looking at Ethan. "Yes," Ethan said, smiling. "As much as you want." She considered this, then nodded. "Okay. That feels right." They worked out small things first: weekends, school schedules, birthdays, bedtimes, nothing legal yet, just human. Over the next weeks, Ivy moved between homes with increasing ease. She kept a backpack with her favorite things, though Rosie never left her side. One afternoon, Ethan found Ivy drawing at the kitchen table. She'd drawn 3 figures holding hands beneath a wide sky. "That's us," she said. "All of us." Ethan pinned the drawing to the refrigerator without a word. That night, Ivy had a nightmare. Ethan was at her bedside in seconds. "I thought I was lost again," she whispered. He sat with her until her breathing slowed. "You're not lost," he said. "You're home, in more than one place." She nodded sleepily. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, something rare was happening. Not a rescue, a rebuilding. The stars went up on a Thursday. Ethan hired an artist not to repaint the room, but to keep a promise. Ivy sat cross-legged on the bed, watching as tiny lights appeared on the ceiling, constellations, planets, soft, glowing moons. "The whole sky," she asked. "The whole sky," Ethan confirmed. That night, Ivy lay beneath it, all eyes wide. "It feels like I can breathe better," she said. Ethan sat beside her. "Dad," she asked quietly. "Yes, why did you look for me so long?" He took a moment. "Because love doesn't stop just because you can't see someone," he said. "It waits." She thought about that. "I waited too," she said. "I just didn't know it." Weeks passed. Ivy grew louder, more curious, more sure. She began calling Ethan Dad without hesitation. Sometimes she corrected herself when talking about Noah. "I have two dads," she explained to a classmate once. "One found me again. At home, they baked cookies, burned the first batch, laughed anyway." One evening, Ivy brought Rosie to Ethan. She was lonely too, she said. "Can she sleep on your nightstand?" "Of course," he replied. On the anniversary of her return, they went to the park, not Riverside, but a new one. Ivy climbed the swings higher and higher. "Watch me," she called. Ethan watched, and for the first time in years, his chest didn't ache with fear. It felt full. As the sun set, Ivy ran back to him. "Dad," she said, breathless, "I like my life." Ethan knelt, hugging her close. "So do I," he whispered. Above them, the sky darkened wide, endless, forgiving. And this time, it stayed. Autumn arrived quietly in Riverhaven. Leaves turned gold along the sidewalks, and the air carried a gentler chill. Ivy walked beside Ethan on the way home from school, kicking a pile of leaves with deliberate joy. "Dad," she said suddenly, testing the word, as if it still held magic. Ethan looked down. "Yes." She hesitated. "Can I tell people you're my dad, like, for real?" His chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with awe. "You don't have to decide anything," he said carefully. "You can take your time." Ivy stopped walking. "But I already did," she said simply. That evening, Hannah and Noah came over for dinner. Nothing fancy pasta salad bread that Noah insisted on slicing too thick. At the table, Ivy swung her legs and told a story about school. Halfway through, she said casually, "My dad's making stars in my room." Hannah looked up. Dad. Ivy nodded. "Ethan." The room went quiet, not awkward, not tense, just still. Hannah smiled first. "That sounds beautiful." Noah raised his glass. "To stars," he said. Later, as dishes were cleared, Ivy tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Can I sleep here tonight?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said. "And tomorrow night, too." He laughed softly. "Yes." That night, as Ethan tucked her in, Ivy hugged Rosie tightly. "Dad," she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm not scared anymore." He kissed her forehead. "Neither am I." After she fell asleep, Ethan stood in the doorway for a long moment, listening to her breathing. For the first time since she vanished, the word father no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a promise he was finally keeping. The paperwork could have been easy. Lawyers had offered options, quiet ones, fast ones. But Ethan said no. "I'm not pressing charges," he told them calmly. They protected her. The judge listened carefully. Hannah and Noah sat behind Ivy, hands folded, fear and hope tangled together. Ethan stood and spoke clearly. "My daughter was never harmed," he said. "She was loved. I won't punish people who gave her safety when I couldn't reach her." The decision surprised many, but it healed everyone. Hannah cried afterward, not from fear, but relief. "I thought you'd hate us," she admitted. "Hate doesn't raise children," Ethan replied. Life settled into a rhythm. Ivy spent weekdays with Ethan. Weekends were shared, some nights at Hannah and Noah's, some nights under the stars Ethan had promised. They lived closer now by choice, not obligation. One afternoon, Ivy came home holding a drawing. This is for you, she said. It showed 3 houses connected by a single path. I didn't know families could look like this, she said. They can, Ethan replied. When people choose kindness. At school, Ivy explained her life simply. I have 2 homes, she told her teacher. That means more hugs. The teacher smiled. So did Ethan. A year later, they held a small gathering in Ethan's backyard. Nothing extravagant, just food, laughter, and a cake with blue frosting. Ivy helped decorate tying balloons, while Rosie watched from a chair. This is our reunion day, she announced proudly. Hannah brought flowers. Noah worked the grill. Neighbors came. Friends from school laughed under the apple tree. As the sun lowered, Ivy climbed onto the small stage Ethan had built. I want to say something, she said, voice steady. Everyone quieted. I was lost once, she said. But people helped me. And now I'm not. She looked at Hannah and Noah. Thank you for finding me. Then, at Ethan. Thank you for never stopping. Ethan felt tears fall freely. That night, as guests left and the yard grew quiet, Ivy sat beside him on the porch. Dad, she said, leaning against his shoulder, do you think the sky remembers us? He smiled. I think it watches. She nodded, satisfied. Later, tucked into bed beneath glowing stars, Ivy whispered, Good night. Good night, Ivy. Good night, Dad. Ethan turned off the light. The house, once empty, now breathed with life. And above a little girl who knew she was loved by many in many ways, the sky remained wide, gentle, and unafraid to stay. Did this story move your soul? Share your feelings in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Click the end screen to watch another heartfelt video. See you in the next story.